All right, guys. Just wanna talk about. Well, last night actually, I came up with the topic. I didn't know I was gonna make a video. I was gonna try to do like a morning show, maybe not even on the topic of theology, but another thing came up again last night. Um, I went to bed after seeing a few videos on this nonsense or this debacle or scandal, whatever, about the academy and hadith. Um, I don't know 100% all the history on that. I do have to research. Um, but I just see a lot of videos of people online, particularly Christians, uh, like spouting this and then like replaying it and saying, ha, 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 like, and then they say in their videos as if Christianity is historical fact. And I don't understand the debate so too much. Explain to me in the bottom of the in the comments. Um, but I just want to, I guess, address the fact that I mean, like, I don't think I understand the debate because when does because the academy, of course, and this is a Yasidik Credit quote, but the academy, of course, is referring to academia, right? The academic world. Um, when have they like treated any religion as historical fact? Um, and I'm seeing these videos of them saying like, yeah, well, we got the Muslims on this, but it's like, I mean, you need to take a chapter out of your own book with, take the log out of your own eye before you take a splinter out of somebody else's. Because uh, I don't understand how you can sit there and act like the academy or academia takes um, Christianity serious or as historical fact. Uh, because it doesn't. Um, like I mean, like I said, I have a bachelor's degree in sociology. I took many courses in religions and stuff because this is a big part of society. I also have a master's degree in linguistics, which might come. It's going to actually come and play in a little bit of topic here coming up. So that because I already know kind of where the topic's going to steer. Uh, yeah, it just explain to me in the comments because not only around this situation I've been seeing this or hearing these videos like this. Uh, in the past too, I've been hearing videos of people trying to say as if the Bible is historical truth or Jesus is historical. Uh, like history proves that he was real or something. Since when? I don't understand. I mean, explain that to me in the comments. Since when? Um, because was it taught in your history courses? I mean, did you go to? I mean, is that what they do in Christian schools? I went to public school. I mean, do they teach you like as fact or something when you go to history class? Or do they separate them like they do in in the secular world? Uh, I, I don't know. You know, growing up in the West, you know that you go to history classes as a child, you learn history, and religion is separate from that because it like really can't be 100% proved. Um, and I remember growing up like that, and I remember even once when I was like in college, then there's a big documentary. I think I was in college or maybe high school. I think I was like, there's a big documentary that was coming out uh, because they think they found the name of Jesus or something on one of these like a burial tomb. They think they found a like a relative of his or something. I think it said brother Jesus or something like that. Um, on a tomb that was like from that era and region or something. But in the end, it couldn't really prove anything. They said. But I remember this big documentary coming out with it almost as if there was evidence of it, but it turned out it really wasn't. And I remember seeing that DVD at my local public library, and I think I saw that. Yeah, I think I saw it a while back. This was years ago. I was young. Um, and I thought that was interesting, but it still didn't wasn't definitive. So I don't understand how Christians going around acting like the Bible historical fact as if the Gospels are written by witnesses. I understand that that's the tradition. I understand that's what you're told the tradition is, but if you want to compare the academy or academia, I guess academia is really what we call it in the West, right? I think that's what the academy is referring to, right? I mean, but let me know in the comments if I got it wrong. But you know, academia doesn't take Christianity serious. It doesn't take it doesn't your own biblical scholars dispute like everything in the Bible. Who wrote the Gospels, when it was written, um, you know, I mean how it was written, stuff like that, like New Testament and Old Testament. Okay, I know you can't see the comments too much on the screen over here. I'll work on fixing that up, but I'll read it out loud. It's just helping me see it. And I'll look at ChatGPT GPT to fact check me. But I don't know. I commented to this one video. I think the guy was a Christian, and he really had this kind of attitude too, like as if, see, they got a horrible religion, and they can't stand up to Christianity. I mean, like it doesn't. If this is true, it says it's on par with Christianity. Okay, and I guess you need to know what you're talking about. I mean, like I said, I took courses on this in college. Um, so my comment was, are you saying the academy in quotes, right? Uh, does recognize the authentication of scriptures from the Bible? Like that's what I asked the guy. No one replied, but uh, it doesn't. Academia does not um, recognize the authentication of scriptures in the Bible. Like I said, they dispute your own Christian scholars, our own Christian scholars dispute who wrote it, when it was written, how it was written. They say they copy from each other, they copy from other sources, stuff like that. And I saw this one comment, and this guy's going off on Islam and saying something about, oh yeah, y'all don't have like the language is not correct. This is where background linguistics comes in because it's talking about. Oh wait.
The Muslim Sunni science of hadith.
Oh,
Nobody. It is considered to be completely discredited. I'm just
let me stop.
Awesome. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, I don't know. I accidentally played. Um, all right, so let me find my reply again. Some guy started arguing with somebody on the comments. I guess comments are going to be a great place to find some content here. But this guy goes on about something about uh like as if it was horrible preservation with Quran because they didn't write the vowels and then you read the vowels later and something like that. And I fact checked this with ChatGPT already, and I don't know all the details on it, but it did say something similar to that, saying that it wasn't a thing. Why are you why are you like just like why even I wouldn't even bring that up as a Christian because, like I said, take the log out of your own eye before you take a splinter out of somebody else's. You're just on par. Like Christianity, like you just made Islam on par with Christianity. That is the exact problem that's in the Old Testament. In Hebrew, when they wrote the Hebrew down, they didn't have the vowel sounds, the little symbols for the vowel sounds and stuff like that. That's how the name of God literally got lost. That's how the name of God became Jehovah. Okay, like I said, I remember learning this in the college course. You know, and my own personal research. I do personal research as a hobby, but um, the thing is, early Hebrew they didn't put any vowel symbols. They just already knew. So I guess it's a common thing with languages. If I didn't know that was a thing with Arabic either, and I don't know how much of an issue it would be, but apparently it's such an issue in Hebrew that things got mixed up. Like the actual name of God. Now the issue is um, when Moses asked in the Old Testament um, what God like the people are going to ask me what God sent me. Who do I tell them? And of course, most translations are going to say, "Tell them that I am sent you." Um, Now, if you go all the way back to original Hebrew, um, it doesn't say I am. It's a tetranomogram. I think that's what we call it. Maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong. Which is like a three-letter word, a YHW, I believe it is. Let me ask ChatGPT. What's the tetranomogram in and if I'm pronouncing that right in for the Old Testament?
Yeah, you pretty much got it. The Tetragrammaton is
Or
the
tetragrammaton?
four-letter biblical name of
Four.
God found in the Old Testament, and it's written as YHWH. People often pronounce it as Yahweh,
Yahweh.
though the exact pronunciation is something of a mystery since ancient Hebrew didn't include vowels.
Yeah. He mentioned what I told you right there. Um, it was funny. This guy was criticizing Islam for that, and I don't know if there's any specific instances. I don't want to slow us down on the topic where that could be an issue, but this is a big issue right here because they don't know how to pronounce the name of God. They think Yahweh means I am. Let me ask ChatGPT. How does Yahweh become I am or those letters?
That's a great question. The connection comes from the Hebrew verb to be. When God reveals his name to Moses in the burning bush, he says, I am who I am, which in Hebrew is related to the root of the name Yahweh. So it's kind of a play on words that links the divine name to the concept of existence itself.
I'm getting to something good. Because I don't know if I mentioned or not, but we're getting to how they say the name of God is Jehovah. Uh, Now different religions use that uh, in different contexts, I guess. Um, but if you ever seen Indiana Jones, remember the Last Crusade, the one with his dad? He had to step on those stones. He needs the name of God, right? And he says Jehovah. Well, that is a linguistic mistake. That's what academia says, at least. Comment below if like I said, I'm just telling you what academia says. I'm not saying that that's uh, and it actually, if you know what they say, it's it makes sense as because what happened was the name of God was so holy that when they're rewriting any of those, I don't know what they would have been, clerics, priests, or whatever, rewriting scriptures of the Old Testament, um, they wouldn't pronounce the name because it was so holy. They would say Adonai, which I think just means God. Let me see. What what does Adonai mean?
So Adonai is another Hebrew word that means Lord.
No, Lord.
It's used as a spoken substitute for the Tetragrammaton because the name Yahweh is considered so sacred.
Mhm.
Many Jewish traditions use Adonai when reading scripture out loud as a way of showing reverence.
Yeah, well, so he's picking up the topic before I can get into it as it's evolving. So they wouldn't say the name like he already verified with me because it was so holy. They would say Adonai, which means Lord, because they wouldn't want to say the name, take the Lord name in vain. So when the language changed and they started adding vowel sounds in Hebrew, they started adding the vowel sounds for Adonai to remind them that they're supposed to say Adonai, not uh, you know, Yahweh, which the actual pronunciation is missing. They think. Let me ask ChatGPT. Um, Explain this tetranomogram thing, or tell me how to pronounce it again. But like, why is it that it means I am, but it's does it really mean I am, or is it something missing in between? Yeah, tell me.
So you got it. So the Tetragrammaton does come from the same root as the phrase I am, but it's more like a proper name that carries that meaning of existence or being. So when we say it means I am, it's like a shorthand for that deeper concept of God being
Hold on,
eternal.
hold on. Do we know that the name of God is Yahweh? I think that's what I need to ask.
Well, scholars and religious traditions have pieced together that the name is likely pronounced something like Yahweh, but because ancient Hebrew didn't write down vowels, and the name was considered too sacred to pronounce out loud.
Oh yeah.
The exact pronunciation has been lost to history. So Yahweh is the best guess based on what we know.
That's what I was trying to get at. It wasn't like the word literally just said Yahweh and they mixed it with Adonai. Since there was no vowels at all, they don't know the vowels. I would have gone with those letters. They think the best guess is Yahweh. Okay. But when they started actually putting the vowel sounds in the language, in Hebrew, as Hebrew evolved, they started putting the vowel sounds only for Adonai to remind them to say Adonai. So when you say later, when they started translating the vowels for Adonai into Yahweh. That's how they get Jehovah. So let's just double. I'll let you hear from ChatGPT. Can you explain the whole process of how the vowels for Adonai got mixed up with Yahweh to create Jehovah?
Absolutely. So what happened is that when Hebrew scriptures were being read, people would see the consonants for Yahweh, but they would actually say Adonai out of reverence. Later on, when medieval scholars were adding vowel marks to the Hebrew text, they took the vowels from Adonai and combined them with the consonants of Yahweh. This created this hybrid form that eventually got Latinized into Jehovah. So it's basically a mix of the two that led to that pronunciation.
That's exactly what I said, right? I just fact checked myself. But like I said, exactly what I said. I'm not misleading anybody. But people need to do some basic research before they even open their mouth. This guy's criticizing Islam for an issue that which I don't even know. I have to look into it more. Is there were there any issues like because that was issue with early Abrahamic religion. So like I'm talking about Jews and Christians, right? Because the beginning of the Bible is really the Torah, which is the Jewish Torah. So if anything, you just brought the other religion down to being on par with you. Now, like I said, I don't know too much about Hadith, but I have heard and I do respect what I've heard about the great detail of how they kept that's why a lot of people point to the Hadith says this, the Hadith says this, but there's varying level of Hadith, and what I've heard, and comment below to correct me if I'm wrong, that they've even documented the stories that weren't true. And then they documented if that person was trustworthy, reliable. And then as they have the signs of hadith where they figure out, like, was this likely a true story or not? That sounds very thorough to me. And like I said, like when I heard that, I was like, man, you even documented the lies and documented who's saying it and what the reputation was. It was a reputation to be an exaggerator, a liar, a truthful, honest person, a person who was always accurate. Like what was the source? Like, and I don't know. So if academia doesn't take them serious, all you do is put them on par with Christianity. So I don't know why Christians are out there going like, like they don't have what we have. We're on par with them. Okay. So anyway, this guy was complaining or like criticizing their linguistic issues with the vowel sounds in Arabic. So I replied to some guy who's arguing with him. But I wonder if the guy you're arguing with on here about vowel marks and language change is Christian. If he is, it's a joke of an argument to make, considering that's exactly the problem with the Old Testament and Hebrew. That's literally how they get Jehovah for the name of God. I am YHW. I think there's really supposed to be 4 letters, right? I may have wrote it wrong. Blended with vowels of Adonai. At least that's what the biblical scholars say. I'm not sure I'm understanding the whole thing. Seems like Christians are all online saying scholars don't take Muslim science of hadith to heart or to hard fact as hard fact, but yet they act like scholars take the Bible as factual historical document. As someone who studied some of this in college, I assure you Christian scholars do not authenticate the biblical writings as historically accurate fact. They heavily dispute who the authors were. when they were written, and even the evidence of gospels copying other gospels, as well as evidence of other sources lost to us now. So to look those up, if you want to know what I'm talking about, uh, in the New Testament they have the Q sources, and in the Old Testament they think there was, like, of course the tradition is, oh, Moses wrote this, but biblical scholars say that there's like likely four sources that they could tell for the style of writing. And then they label them like letters. I asked ChatGPT earlier because I forgot, it's been a long time since I was in college with that. But it says, I think they have the source was J and an E and a D and a P. I copied it. I wrote in my comic. I copied it from ChatGPT earlier because I had to get a refresher on that. Um, and then you can see in the writing styles, and it looks like they're all like being clipped together, like these different styles. So, anyways, I put it as a Christian. Uh, I also tell you, all Christians, unless they're insincere, should also know this. That's why it's not taught in history classes, in the West, as if it's factual history. Okay, any Christian that tries to act like it's scholarly fact, are ignorant or just lying. So, am I understanding the dispute correctly? So, I needed somebody to comment below and let me know. Am I understanding the dispute correctly? Because, I mean, are you just like ignorant and arrogant Christians going around saying like, you somehow, I mean, at the very greatest, you drug them down to your level. They're on par with you now, or something. If you can criticize them that much, I don't see nothing wrong with that comment. Or what I see the critique saying the academia doesn't take, or the academy doesn't take, hadith science seriously. I mean, and then people are in the comments talking about. I mean, I don't see a problem because it's the same with Christianity. But people are in the comments talking about like, oh, the telephone game. The telephone game has a name. First of all, let me look that up. I remember, it's been a while though. What is the name of that game where it's called a telephone game, where you tell one person one thing and they tell the next person thing and then it changes?
Oh yeah, that's often called the telephone game. It's that classic game where a message.
No, what's the actual name for that game? It's not calling the telephone game. There's a name for it. I've heard this.
Oh, I see what you mean. The game is often just called telephone by most people, but in some places it might also be known as Chinese whispers. It really depends on the region and what people grew up calling
I
it.
thought there was another name, but now I'm thinking of that Red Dwarf thing. The new Red Dwarf that came out. Anyways, I thought there was another name for that. I don't know, but where was I at? Yeah, I mean, at greatest, Christianity brought them down to their level. They were on par with them because academia doesn't. They dispute who wrote the gospel. Let me see. Do Christian scholars? I mean, tell me about how Christian scholars dispute if the gospels were actual factual evidence. I mean, or firsthand counts.
Yeah, that is a really interesting topic. So among Christian scholars, there's definitely a discussion about whether the Gospels were first-hand eyewitness accounts or if they were written based on earlier traditions and sources. Some scholars believe that the Gospel writers had direct knowledge or were close to eyewitnesses, while others think that the Gospels were compiled from oral traditions and community stories over time. So there's definitely a range of views on that.
Who are the what are the names of the Gospels? I just don't want to be wrong. I get them.
The four Gospels in the New Testament are named Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Each one gives its own unique perspective on the life and teachings of Jesus.
Tell me about each one and who scholars believe actually wrote it.
Sure. So the Gospel of Matthew is traditionally attributed to Matthew, who was one of the 12 apostles and a former tax collector. The Gospel of Mark is thought to have been.
No. I don't want to know who the scholars attributed to.
Got it. So scholars generally agree on the traditional attributions, but there are debates. For example, the Gospel of Matthew is traditionally attributed to the apostle Matthew, but some scholars think it was written by a Jewish Christian scribe. The Gospel of Mark is often considered to be based on Peter's teachings, even if it wasn't directly written by John Mark. Luke is thought to have been written by Luke, who was a companion of Paul, and
Not the
John
apostle.
is traditionally attributed to the Apostle John, although some scholars think it may have been written by one of his disciples.
So yeah, there's debate on and not only that is that if they were first-hand accounts, I just what I don't get. I feel like there's like I don't know how to describe. I almost want to say holes in narrative, but that is that thing they've been saying lately, right? But like it's all the stories, the gospels, they're not written as first-hand accounts. Aren't they written as narratives? Because if you think about it, let me double check something with ChatGPT because I don't want to say wrong, but um, so in the Garden of Yosemite, was did Jesus go off alone?
Yeah, that's right. In the
Okay,
Garden of
hold on, hold on.
Gethsemane.
Uh, are there quotes about what Jesus said when he was alone?
Yes, actually, the Gospels do record what Jesus prayed during that time,
Okay.
even though he was alone.
How would anybody know if
It's
he was
likely
alone?
that he shared those moments with his disciples later on,
Okay,
and
but it wasn't written like that,
that's
right?
how they were able to write.
Wait, but was it written in that fashion?
Well, the Gospels don't specifically say how the disciples came to know his exact words, but it's generally understood that Jesus must have shared that with them afterwards, or it could have been revealed.
All right. So what about which apostles were there to witness the crucifixion?
According to the Gospels, the Apostle John is mentioned as being present at the crucifixion.
At what point? Was he there the whole time?
The Gospel of John does indicate that he was there at the foot of the cross, especially when Jesus entrusted the care of his mother Mary to him. But we don't have a detailed account of whether he was there the entire time or if he arrived at a certain point during the crucifixion.
Okay. I thought the followers of Jesus fled at the time in fear.
Yeah, you're right. In the Gospels, we do hear that many of the disciples scattered when Jesus was arrested. But it does seem that John, along with some of the women followers like Mary, the mother of Jesus, stayed nearby during the crucifixion.
Why are there different stories in if there was these written by witnesses? I mean, did he carry a cross or did somebody else carry it? Why are there different stories?
That's a really interesting point. The Gospels do have slightly different perspectives, and that can be because they were written by different authors for different audiences. Each one kind of emphasizes different details.
What are the differences in this part?
One of the differences is about who carried the cross. In some Gospels, it mentions that Jesus carried it himself, and then Simon of Cyrene was pulled from the crowd to help him. And there are also different details about what exactly was said at the crucifixion. But all of these different perspectives together give us a fuller picture of the story.
Okay, now I know the argument is usually, oh, it's different perspectives, but sometimes when you look into stuff, it's like, how could they've gotten that wrong? You know, like the thing about if there were angels there or not, or if there was a rock that had to be rolled away or not. Um, but like I said, these are just issues that's why academia doesn't like they dispute who's writing it, when they're writing it. Let me see. Let me talk to Shay. Uh, can you tell me some of what the biblical scholars think about when these gospels were written?
Sure, most scholars generally agree that the Gospels were written a few decades after Jesus' life. Mark is often considered the earliest, written around 70 AD, and then Matthew and Luke came a bit later, maybe in the 80s or 90s AD, and John is usually considered the last one, probably written around the end of the first century.
Around what year would be the end of the first century?
The end of the first century would be around the year 100 AD.
Wait, I thought you told me that was probably really written by John.
Yes, traditionally it's attributed to John, but Scholars just have different perspectives on when it was actually written down.
Okay, when we're talking, I want factual knowledge. I don't want tradition or what or like the dogma or whatever you call that. I can't believe it's I bumped this a lot where Chat
Got it. I understand.
GPT
In
is
that case,
like
from a
telling
more
you
historical
Christian
perspective,
stuff.
many scholars believe that the Gospel of John was likely written by a community of followers who were inspired by John,
Okay, so it wasn't John.
rather than necessarily John.
That's what I'm
himself
talking
as a
about.
single author.
And ChatGPT does have a an inclination toward telling you things that aren't fact. I've seen it myself, and then you have to question it, especially when it comes to theology. It seems like it's like pro Christianity. Yeah, I mean that's something interesting. Maybe some of these other content creators should look into that. But uh, oh, let me talk about this. Can you tell me about the the Q document? Or like, isn't that what it's called? Or where they think there was other sources being mixed in? Tell me about that.
Yes, exactly. The Q document is a hypothetical source
Which lost
that
now.
many
That's why
scholars
it's
think both
hypothetical.
Matthew and Luke used when they were writing their Gospels. It would have been a collection of Jesus's sayings and teachings, and it's called Q from the German word Quelle, which means source. So it's just a theory, but it helps explain some of the similarities between Matthew and Luke.
Give me some details on that.
Sure, the idea of the Q document comes from the fact that Matthew and Luke share a lot of material that isn't found in Mark. This led scholars to hypothesize that there must have been another source of Jesus' sayings that both of them had access to. This source, Q, is thought to have been primarily a written collection of Jesus' teachings and sayings rather than narrative stories. And it helps explain why Matthew and Luke have a lot of common material.
Okay, is that the only issue like that in the New Testament?
It's definitely one of the most well-known ones. But there are other similar issues too. For example, scholars think that the Gospel of Luke and the Book of Acts were written by the same author and that he might have had his own sources as well. So it's kind of a fascinating puzzle when you. It's definitely one.
Why do biblical scholars think these things? I mean, what evidence makes them think this?
Well, scholars notice that Matthew and Luke have a lot of the same sayings and teachings of Jesus that aren't found in Mark, and they often appear in a similar order and with similar wording. This suggests that they were both using a common source. Since that source hasn't survived, it's hypothetical, but the patterns in the text are what lead scholars to believe that it exists.
And this is the academy. This is academia. Um, is it the same issue with the Old Testament?
In a way, yes. The Old Testament also has something similar when it comes to the first 5 books, known in the Pentateuch. Scholars have proposed something called the documentary hypothesis, which suggests that these books were compiled from multiple sources. So it's kind of a similar idea to the Q document in the New Testament.
Why do they think it's multiple sources? Go into details about that.
Well, scholars notice that there are differences in style, vocabulary, and even the names used for God in different parts of the text. These patterns suggest that the text was compiled from different traditions or sources over time and then woven together into the final version that we have today.
Does academia, let's solve this right now. Does academia take biblical writings as historical fact or as being truthful? I don't know how I say
In
it.
academia, biblical writings are often studied as historical documents, but scholars tend to analyze them critically, looking at the context in which they were written and comparing them with other historical evidence. So while they do recognize the cultural and religious significance, they also approach them with historical methods to understand them better.
I don't feel like you answered the question. Does academia consider all it to be like uh, historical, factual documentation?
I understand what you're asking now. In general, academia tends to approach biblical texts as historical sources that reflect the beliefs and context of their time, but not necessarily as straightforward historical facts. Scholars use critical methods to compare them with other historical evidence
I
and
feel like
sources to piece together the historical context.
I feel like there's that little thing at the beginning that was like, uh, I don't know. It's almost like sometimes he doesn't want to upset Christianity or somehow, or somebody think probably assumes I'm Christian or something. I don't know. Um, I feel like Chat GPT does have a inclination toward us being like pro Christianity and saying things that are more tradition than the actual fact. I forgot off the top of my head, but I had to ask some other things before in the past, and that when I would ask it and I'll question it more, then you'll be like, oh no, that's of course that's just you know the tradition or what they say or something, like. But I think you give us the answer there. Um, Even though let's get them to get factual. I just want you to be unbiased, factual, and answer me that again.
Of course, in an academic context, biblical writings are usually treated as important historical and cultural documents. Scholars analyze them critically, and while they do consider them valuable sources, they don't automatically assume that everything in them is a literal historical fact. They look at them in the broader context of historical evidence.
Why do I feel like you're telling me like one thing and then saying another?
I see what you mean. The main idea is that scholars really value the Bible as an important historical and cultural text, but they approach it with a critical lens, comparing it with other historical sources.
So are
it's not
the scriptures taken as historical fact? I think I know the answer to this, but
in general, scholars treat the scriptures as historical sources that reflect the beliefs and cultural context of the time.
Fact. I want to know, is it fact or not?
Understood. In short, academic consensus generally doesn't take every detail of the scriptures as literal historical fact. Instead, they analyze them critically and compare them with other historical.
Let me ask him. I'm curious. I've never been asked him before. What about the Jesus as a historical figure? Okay, not just answer me that as an unbiased scholarly uh, approach.
Absolutely. Most scholars do agree that Jesus was indeed a historical figure who lived in the first century. There's a strong consensus that he existed based on both biblical texts and other historical references from that time.
Like what historical references? I haven't heard of these before.
Some of the historical references to Jesus outside of the Bible come from ancient historians like Josephus, who was a Jewish historian, and Tacitus, who was a Roman historian. They both mention Jesus in their writings, which helps support the historical existence of Jesus as a real person.
So tell me more about what they exactly wrote and when.
Sure, Josephus wrote in the late first century, and he mentions Jesus in his work called Antiquities of the Jews. He talks about Jesus as a wise teacher and mentions his crucifixion under Pontius Pilate. Tacitus, on the other hand.
Wait. When was this written?
Josephus wrote his Antiquities of the Jews around the year 93 or 94 AD, and Tacitus wrote his annals.
How do we know he's not just writing like hearsay?
That's a fair question, and historians do consider that these ancient historians were relying on sources available to them at the time, which could include hearsay or earlier records. But the fact that multiple...
Wait, how could you tell me that scholars say that that's historical evidence if it hearsay?
I understand what you mean. When scholars consider historical evidence, they look at multiple sources and the consistency between them, even if some details come from secondhand accounts. The fact that different sources refer to the same figure helps build a historical picture. It's about piecing together the evidence as a whole.
I'm not sure if I'm grasping that. So so you're telling me if there's multiple sources of hearsay that say the same thing, it'll be taken as historical fact?
I get what you're saying. In history, it's not so much about taking something as absolute fact just because multiple sources mention it, but rather looking at the overall consistency and the reliability of those sources. So historians weigh all the evidence together to form the best possible understanding.
Tell me some more details on this topic. While
Sure,
remaining unbiased.
absolutely. I'll keep it as objective as possible. Essentially, historians use a variety of sources and weigh their credibility to build a historical narrative. When multiple independent sources, even if they're not firsthand, align on certain key details, it helps increase confidence in those details. It's all about examining the evidence as thoroughly and objectively as possible.
So, are there any historically verifiable first-hand accounts?
As far as we know, there aren't any surviving first-hand accounts written by direct witnesses of Jesus. Most of what we have comes from the Gospels and other writings that we compiled a few decades after his life, and from historians who wrote about him based on the information available at that time.
I thought you just told me the Gospel of John was first-hand account.
I see what you mean.
Probably because I
The
told him to
Gospel
be
of John
unbiased.
is traditionally attributed to
Traditionally
the Apostle John, who would have been a
attributed.
first-hand witness. However, many scholars believe that the Gospel was likely written by a community of his followers rather than John himself.
Okay. I feel like earlier you didn't tell me that way. Why is that?
I appreciate you pointing that out, and I apologize if I wasn't as clear before. Sometimes these topics have a lot of nuance, and I definitely want to make sure that I'm giving you the clearest and most accurate information. Thanks for your understanding.
So if there are no first-hand accounts, how could they say these like this historically fact?
That's a good point. When historians say that something is historically supported, they rely on the overall convergence of evidence. Even if we don't have direct first-hand accounts, the consistency and multiple references across different sources help historians form a strong.
Okay, are there any like I mean, say a valid source would be like a Roman document or somebody who's some like firsthand information, or what would you call that? Like not secondary information. Is there any information that's not secondary?
I get what you're asking. Most of the information we have about Jesus does come from sources that are considered secondary. We don't have any known first-hand accounts that have survived, but historians consider the writings of historians like Josephus and Tacitus to be valuable because they were relatively close in time to the events they describe.
And what exactly did they write? I'm gonna try to cut this short here in a while, but
Josephus mentioned Jesus briefly in his work, referring to him as a wise teacher and noting his crucifixion under Pontius Pilate. Tacitus, on the other hand, also mentioned that Jesus was executed during the reign of Emperor Tiberius by the order of Pontius Pilate, and he referred to the early Christians in Rome. These references, while brief, do help support the historical existence of Jesus.
Was Pontius Pilate an actual character? I thought that was disputed too, actually.
Yes, Pontius Pilate was indeed a historical figure. He was the Roman governor of Judea from around 26 to 36 AD, and there are multiple historical sources that mention him, including inscriptions and writings from historians like Josephus and Tacitus.
And this historical figure matches up with the timeline?
Yes, the timeline of Pontius Pilate's governorship does match up with the time period in which Jesus is said to have lived and been crucified, according to the historical.
That I didn't know. Give me some more information on that.
Certainly, Pontius Pilate served as the Roman governor or prefect of.
Well, what's the evidence of that?
one key piece of evidence is the Pilate Stone, which is an inscription that was discovered in Caesarea Maritima, and it actually bears his name and title. And of course, historians like Josephus and Tacitus also mention him in their writings, which helps corroborate his
Explain the
existence.
stone.
The Pilate Stone is a really interesting archaeological find. It's basically a block of limestone that was discovered in 1961, and it has an inscription that mentions Pontius Pilate by name, referring to him as the prefect of Judea. This stone is one of the few physical pieces of evidence that confirm his historical role and title.
I never heard of that. Um, with all this topic that I've been talking about, keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. It's always fascinating to dive into these historical details. And if you have any more questions about the topic or anything else you'd like to explore.
Those two historians you keep bringing up, why do you give them such credibility? When to me it sounds like it's your secondary information and hearsay.
That's a fair point. Historians like Josephus and Tacitus are considered credible because they were writing relatively close in time to the events they describe, and they had access to records and sources that are now lost to us. While their accounts are indeed secondary.
But we're talking about like 100 years later almost, right?
Yes, that's true. Tacitus wrote his account in the early 2nd century, and Josephus wrote in the late 1st century. So they were indeed writing a few decades after the events.
I mean, could you say it's kind of biased to consider them factual?
I understand what you mean. Historians do try to approach these sources critically, and they recognize that no source is completely free from bias. They consider these accounts as pieces of a larger puzzle when reconstructing.
Can you just give me a yes or no answer?
Yes, it could be considered somewhat biased to treat them as completely factual without.
Okay.
Got it.
This is what I'm saying. There's a problem with chat.
Any other questions you have, feel free to let me know.
We're gonna end it there. Like I said, when I'm hearing it, it sounds biased, or like I could just because it's the earliest accounts, it could still be hearsay, right? I just don't. You're talking about many years after still. That would be like we're talking about like 100 years, right? I think. So correct me if I'm wrong. What is it right now? 2025. That's if. Well, you can't even compare it to 1925 because historians were documenting things better back then. I mean, I don't know. Oh, let me hear more about this Pontius Pilate stone. You want to stick around for you can? Let me see. Tell me more about this Pontius Pilate stone. I have never heard of that. And yeah, tell me more. Unbiased. Tell me with unbiased perspective. Like, does anybody dispute this authenticity, or what it's really referring to?
Sure, the Pilate stone is widely accepted as authentic by scholars, and it was discovered in 1961 in Caesarea, which was the capital of the Roman province of Judea. The inscription on the stone mentions Pontius Pilate and his title, and it's considered a significant archaeological find. There isn't much serious dispute about its authenticity among scholars.
Now, I mean, that proves that was a historical figure, but let me see. Tell me more about it.
Absolutely. The Pilate stone was actually found reused in a staircase in the Roman theatre at Caesarea, and it dates back to around 26 to 36 AD, which matches Pilate's time as governor. The inscription confirms his title and provides historical validation of his role and existence, which is why it's such a crucial find for historians and archaeologists.
And how does this relate to everything we're talking about?
The Pilate stone is significant because it provides concrete archaeological evidence of Pontius Pilate's existence and his role as the governor of
But
Judea,
I feel like you told me that that was evidence, historical evidence of Jesus. But yet couldn't the stories been made with like in a way of considered historical fiction? Unbiased. Give me an unbiased perspective. Like you use historical
I
facts, but
understand what you mean. The Pilate stone itself is direct evidence of Pontius Pilate's existence and his governorship. While it doesn't directly prove the events of Jesus' life, it does confirm the historical context in which those events are said to have taken place.
it what?
It helps to ground the historical context of the time period in which Jesus is said to have lived, confirming that figures like Pontius Pilate did indeed exist and rule during that era.
Okay, so help me understand how this makes sense, historically speaking, because if you take a piece of historical fiction and prove some of the characters, key characters, or events were real, how does that prove that that story is real?
I get what you're saying. Essentially, confirming the existence of historical figures like Pontius Pilate helps to validate the historical context of the narratives. It doesn't necessarily.
Hold on. Let me tell you my perspective. If you, I never saw that movie, but it was what was it? The one Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer. I never saw it, but the title kind of gives you an idea what it is. Couldn't somebody use those same conclusions to say, oh, well, he was a real character. These he was really in the Civil War. Therefore, the story must be true. I mean, aren't we kind of saying the same thing?
I'm sorry, but you've hit the daily limit for advanced voice.
Let's leave it there. Okay. Tell me in the comments what you think. All right. I run out of minutes. So let me go and